Today's guest is Lynda Fisher. She's a speaker, author, and amputee advocate whose life is a powerful statement to finding purpose in the midst of unimaginable loss. After surviving a devastating tragedy that changed her life forever, Lynda chose that her circumstances would not define the rest of her story. Instead, she's dedicated her life to encouraging others to keep moving forward through life's hardest seasons with faith, hope, and resilience. Through her story, Lynda reminds us that while we can't always choose what happens to us, we can choose how we respond. And in this conversation, we talk about navigating grief, rebuilding after tragedy, discovering purpose through pain, and what it really looks like to find hope again, even when life looks nothing like you expected. I can't wait for you guys to meet Lynda, so let's dive into today's episode. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Abundance Formula podcast. Lynda, I'm so excited you're here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Yeah, it's great to see you again. Okay, you guys, I am so excited that Lynda is here with us today. I met her back at GSOP, which is my orthotic and prosthetic Georgia meeting that I do for my licensure in Georgia. And Lynda was brought in. I feel like I met you one other time, but we couldn't ever figure out where it was. But I just knew I'd heard your story. Like, her story is just so incredible. So I had her come talk to us along with some other people, and her story is just so powerful. And I was like, you have got to come on the podcast. So she is here with us today, and I'm so grateful.
Thanks for having me.
Well, so just to start out, please tell everybody your backstory, how you've arrived at where you are today, and then it'll make so much sense as people hear the questions that we have to dive into after that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in rural South Georgia and loved being here, went away to school, came back, married and started having my family, have 4 amazing children, 3 boys and a little girl. And they were just the delightful part of my life. And so I stayed home with them for over 16 years, and that was really my focus for so long. And so we've been a very active family. We've run races together. All my kids played some sort of sport. And so we've done like a marathon relay together. And then Sophia, the youngest, my only girl, she and I were training for a triathlon. And so it was the summer beginning of her senior year. And so we were going out for a bike ride, and we were doing a 10-mile out and back course. And up in the car and went out to the north side of town where it's not as busy, and we unloaded at a friend's house. And I just bought her those biker shorts, you know, and if anybody wears those, they know it's not super comfortable. And she's like, oh, this is terrible. I said, listen, you're going to appreciate them about 7 miles in. So just enjoy. So we were laughing, having a good time. And so we get to an intersection and nothing's coming either way, and we turn left. And then the next thing I remember was me kneeling beside her lifeless body, trying to breathe life back into her, giving her CPR. And what we found out later was that we had been struck by a full-size truck going over 60 miles an hour. And she was killed instantly, and I was injured from head to toe. So the sheriff deputies had to pull me off her body so they could tend to me, and they put me in the ambulance. And I remember the guy at the end of my stretcher saying, Miss Fisher, we did everything we could. And then I just don't remember anything for a while because your mind just protects you. And so I don't remember getting to the hospital or getting out of the ambulance, but I remember waking up just dazed and staring at the ceiling. And my husband walked in from behind the tan curtain in the ER. And I said, she's gone. And he said, what? And I said, she's gone. What he didn't realize was that morning she had gone with me. He'd gone out for a run with some friends earlier, so he did not know. In fact, on his way to the hospital, he tried to call her several times. And so then he realized that Sophia had passed away. And from there, it was just a whirlwind of pain, heartache, tests. They were taking me back for CAT scans, scanning this, that, and the other. And of course, they couldn't give me any medicine because they didn't know if I needed emergency surgery, you know, immediately. And so they wouldn't give me anything for a while. I had my right ear was ripped off a good deal. They had over a dozen stitches just to reattach it from the bike helmet. My right hip was bruised from my waist to my mid thigh. I fractured 8 vertebrae in my back. I shattered my left ankle. I was just a mess physically. not to mention emotionally, because I just remember this cry from deep within in the ER, and it was just from the utter depths of my soul because I'd lost my child. Finally, when they realized internally I wasn't bleeding or anything, and I didn't have to have immediate surgery, they were able to start giving me meds. And what the part that was hurt worst was my left ankle. I just shattered that. And so they got me fixed up, got into a room. And at this point, my boys, I have 3 other boys, and so they were scattered all over the world. James is in the military. He was stationed in Guam. My middle son, Daniel, was actually in Italy visiting a friend. And then my youngest son was in Atlanta going to a soccer game that day. So we had to call all the boys back in. And as God would orchestrate it, Daniel and James landed in Atlanta airport 15 minutes apart, just one gate apart. And so Daniel's now wife, Megan, picked them up and brought them down to the hospital. And so we had that Sunday together. And then the next day they transported me up to Macon to have trauma surgery on my left ankle. You know, and during that time, it's kind of like, do you have a funeral and then do you have surgery, or do you have surgery and then have funeral? I mean, just the decisions we had to make were so hard, and just ones, you're like, can I just rewind and do this whole weekend over? But because of the talus fracture, it was important to get the blood flow back to that bone as soon as possible. So we decided on the surgery and then the funeral. So I had surgery, came back home, and I had visitation at my church, had the funeral the next day. And it was absolutely the worst week of my life, as you can imagine. So that just started the beginning of a very dark season for me. And I'm glad I'm on the other side of it, but things progressed. That year was just full of physical pain. I never got out of that physical pain. All my injuries, and especially that left ankle, was so excruciating. I couldn't walk for the first 12 weeks. And then, of course, I gradually started putting some weight on it. I remember one of my favorite exercises was grabbing the marbles with the toes and picking them up and dropping them in a cup. And I'm like, okay, I was training for a triathlon just weeks ago, and now I'm doing this. And so, you know, that was heartbreaking, not only to have, obviously my daughter had passed away, but my whole life, the way I functioned as a human had just come to a abrupt halt. And so as you can imagine too, I couldn't work much. I did. My work was very gracious to work with me. I gradually worked a little bit here and there, but even before I got to that point, I would have a girlfriend of the day come to my house and sit with me, because I didn't want to be left alone with my own thoughts, and the memories and the visions, and even the dreams I had at night were just horrific with what I had seen. And so I carried that with me, but I didn't want to be alone. And so my husband was off at work, and so I would have a girlfriend of the day to come over. They'd, you know, make sure I had breakfast. We'd talk or cry, or they'd let me sit in silence. They just let me lead that time. They'd feed me lunch, and then they'd put me down like a child for a nap, and then my husband would be home in the afternoon. So that was kind of my life for months on end for quite some time. And then about a year later, still in excruciating pain, crying every single day. And Daniel, our middle son, was the first to get married. So there were some bright spots in that time. So the boys started getting married. So we had that marriage, and that was fun. And I was able to walk. In fact, for Sophia's birthday, about 8 months later, I was able to walk with many of the family members a 5K on Sophia's birthday. It actually fell on a Saturday. So we were able to walk a 5K, and that was very special. So we did that. Again, that was part of who we were as a family, just to do those healthy and fun things together as a family. So we were able to do that. And then Daniel got married, and that was great, but my ankle wasn't better. And so they thought another surgery would help out, get some range of motion. So I went into surgery, and my husband that weekend before said that he wanted a divorce. And that was just heartbreaking. At this hardest time in my life, we'd had difficulties in our marriage for sure. But when I needed someone the most, he was walking out the door. And so I had surgery, and then I come home with no one to take care of me. And I can't walk again, back in the wheelchair. And again, not just the physical, because that was hard enough, but the emotional, all of it wrapped up together. It was a 30-year marriage, and it was just cast aside, and it was heartbreaking. But I didn't have the strength to pour into anything to try to fix. I was honestly trying to survive day by day by day. In fact, the old adage, just one day at a time. There were those early months, I just prayed, Lord, get me to lunch. Lord, just get me through to nap time, get me through to night, because it was just so hard thinking I'm going to sleep and I've got to wake up and just do this all over again. And this was not the life I wanted to lead. It's not what I was used to leading. And so it was heartbreaking on so many measures. And then some more boys. I had some surgeries in there, and the other two boys got married. But I'm so grateful that I was able to dance with all three of my boys at their wedding reception. So that was very special to me. It was painful, but I was definitely going to do it. So I never got out of pain those 3.5 years. And when I calculated, I only walked about 2 of the 4 years during this season in my life. So it was either a wheelchair, crutches, scooter, or something. And so about 3.5 years in, I'm like, I can't do this. I cannot have surgery every single year trying to get through this. And not only was it the surgery, it was just the anticipation. Anytime I would hear an ambulance go by, it was just the trauma of all that wrapped up together. And it was absolutely heartbreaking. And so I just needed an end. So I went to I went to someone up in Nashville, Tennessee. He referred me to somebody at Duke, and I was just trying to get the lay of the land. Okay, can I be fixed? And basically the answer was, we're not sure, but we can keep trying. And that wasn't a good enough answer for me. I just couldn't keep doing this. Maybe if I was 25, but at that point in time, I was 52. And I'm like, I can't keep going through this time and time again. And so I decided, I said, well, if you can't fix me, will you cut it off? And the surgeon's like, well, I'm glad you let me say that, because a lot of people will not let me say the word amputation. But I knew, although I didn't know one amputee, I knew the technology was out there. I knew that the science had caught up. I knew that there had to be a better life out there for me without this ankle. And so for that 3.5 to 4 years is when I had an amputation below the knee on the left side, and recovered. And then 4 years after the day after Sophia's funeral is when I got my first prosthetic. And so that was a wonderful time. And the very next day, I had physical therapy scheduled. I was ready to go. I was ready to engage back and get fully involved. And within 2 weeks, now I haven't used that leg. So my hip muscles, my glutes, my quads, all of it atrophied. But within 2 weeks, I was walking unassisted. Within 2 months, I was running on a treadmill. And in 3.5 months, I went hiking in North Carolina. And 5.5 months that Christmas, I was able to go snow skiing with my children out in Park City, Utah. So I was so grateful for just getting through those 4 years of excruciating emotional, physical pain, and get to the other side. And really losing my leg, I willingly gave it up, but getting rid of that part of my life really helped me regain my life back. So I'm so glad to be on the other side of this very deep, hard valley to walk through. And I'm grateful for where I am today.
Oh gosh, there's just so much incredibleness throughout that whole thing. I can't, wait for people to be able to gain the wisdom from what you've, gone through and been refined by. So the first thing that I think is just so powerful for us to mention is kind of what either beliefs or expectations, or again, literally, what were some of the things you found you had to let go of in order to move forward and truly create something new? The old life was done at that point, what it was. And so clinging to that at some point doesn't allow you the freedom to move forward. So how did that look in your mind, shifting into the passing into this a new season, not as a loss, but how could you make it freedom?
Well, and I would say prior to this, I would be your typical control freak, thinking that I can control those around me, my children, and all the aspects of life. And I think it was, after the accident, I realized there are very few things that I can control. And one of those is how I respond to those things that happen to me. This was an accident. It was a young man that hit us. He did not willingly set out that day to take a life. But it was so important that I let go of the control. I had to let go of my pride too, to ask my girlfriends to come over and sit with me. That was pretty easy, the first surgery. But then when my husband left and I had to ask them to come back the second surgery, and I think I've had about 6 surgeries since the accident, they haven't just loved me and been with me through the first incident. They have been with me now for 8 years, and they continue to be. In fact, I had a total hip replacement just this past December. And again, they came over, brought food, brought me books to read, spent time with me. And that's just the kind of community that we have here in my church and in this small town. And I'm so grateful for that. But just having that change in my mindset that I don't control things and I've got to get rid of my pride and I have to ask for help. And that's hard to do when I was willing and able to do most everything in my life before, but now I physically could not do those things and I needed other people's help.
Mm-hmm. And then what did you find you had to kind of let go of? What did the forgiveness process look like for you, whether it be for the truck driver or, your husband leaving, because that's huge, and just ultimately being able to heal, on the deepest portion, ultimately.
Yeah. I did go to the court where I did see the young gentleman that hit us, and I had a response that I had and made sure that my children were able to read through it and edit it a little bit. And so it was during COVID when I went to court and read through that. And I did want that young man to know that we offered him forgiveness, and because that's what Jesus Christ did for all of us. He did change my life forever, and it's not for the better. But I can't hold on to that pain, and he has to remember that day as well, and he's got to carry that with him. So that is not something I would wish on anyone. Now for my husband, I will say honestly that is even harder for me, because one, he's never asked forgiveness. The young gentleman did ask for forgiveness. But for his actions, we expect those that are closest to us to take care of us, especially when they vowed in sickness and in health till death do us part, forsaking all others. And so when he didn't do that, it really hit so deeply. But I think forgiveness and love are a lot the same. With Christ, it's just we choose to love our husband every day, or choose to love our spouse. And I think that goes with the forgiveness too. I have to choose every day to say, I forgive you, help my unforgiveness. There's still some there, and I'm definitely, it's not all gone. There is a lot of hurt. And it's been very hard, because our expectations of those closest to us are to care for us and are to love us, especially when they made that commitment and that vow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think one thing that's been incredible that you've done, and I know we talked about this the other day, tell everybody kind of that verse. Tell them kind of how you view that and how that made a big difference in this whole process for you.
Yes. It says, yea, though, in Psalm 23, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. That is an action verb. And so we can't, as we're going through this valley, we can't set up a tent. We can't sit there and whine. We can cry. We got to keep having a forward motion in that. And I will be honest, I think there were times that my friends, basically, I feel like they were just dragging me through the valley to help me keep going forward. Because I didn't have it within me. There wasn't that drive. And I'm a very driven person. I've always have goals. I always have a to-do list. I want to succeed. I want to do the next thing. But they really carried me through the valley, through those darkest days. And then I feel like I just crawled a little bit and then was able to stand up, and get to the other side, because I know once we get through the valley and up the mountains just a little bit, we can see some much better views. And that's been so good. Now we're still going to slip. And sometimes I still feel like it doesn't take me much to get to the edge of the cliff. And I feel like I'm going over. There are still those days, their anniversaries, Sophia's birthdays. There are those things that will hurt me. You feel like you're living it all over again. And those are hard days, but I know I've been through the valley and through the darkest part at this point. And I'm up the mountain a little bit, so it feels a lot better.
Mm-hmm. And I know we've also talked about kind of this concept of doing hard things and kind of building the resilience around that. Tell everyone kind of what that was like. And I know the example you gave to me was kind of going back to church for the first time and what that looked like and how you kind of equated that to like a workout almost even, and how that relates to grief. I loved that whole like analogy you gave me.
Yeah. I wish that I could say our family motto was some beautiful Bible verse, but honestly it wasn't. It was suck it up. And so, when our kids came in, and we'd always say blood, flood, or fire, that's the only reason you can interrupt us, blood, flood, or fire. So there were, we had some very, some parenting skills that made some strong children, for one. So I've always felt like, well, you got to suck it up sometimes. You have to do the hard things to get through. And so it doesn't become hard again. And so for church, it was extremely hard for me to go back to church. One, I was in physical pain, but we as a family of 6 sat there in the middle, in the center row, worshiping together. And then here I am trying to go back to church. My boys are all in college or out of college, so they're not home. So here I am alone going to church, and this is where we had the visitation, this is where we had the funeral. So just kind of reliving all those things, it was very difficult. So I text my good friend Lisa, I'm like, are you going to be at church? And she's like, yes, I'll save you a seat. So she'd always save me a seat on the edge. And to start with, I would come late and I would leave early so I didn't have to talk to anybody. And I would do that for a while. And this took years. I mean, this took several years. And then I would go late and I'd stay till it was all the way over and talk to maybe a few people, and then I would leave. So just building up what I was able to emotionally handle. And it's honestly because we were so well loved, and people care and they want to come up and make sure I'm okay and hug me. But there's only so much you can take of that at one time. And so then it got to where I could go early and sit with them, and I could stay late. And now to this day, I don't have to check with anybody. Hey, are you going to be there? Can I have somebody, a wingman by me? I'll sit with a friend or sit by myself, and it's perfectly okay because I was able to build that resilience. And I was thinking about it's been 8 years since the accident and since Sophia's death. And I was thinking about that and grief, and does it really get easier 8 years later? And I don't think that the weight of the grief changes. I think it's as heavy now as it was 8 years ago. But it's kind of like exercising. If I'm going to lift a barbell that's 75 pounds, the first time I may need some spotters. I may need somebody to help me to pick up that bar and to lift that. But if I do it every single day, it's going to get a little bit easier. Now, if I don't eat right, if I don't get enough rest, I may have to ask the spotters to come back and to help me out again, and we'll try again. And but over time, in a year, in 2 years, I'm going to be able to pump that bar up a lot easier than I was when I first started. Now, the weight of the bar hasn't changed at all, but the strength that I've built and the micro tears in my muscles have changed. And I think that's a lot with grief. We have to go through those hard things. We have to lift the grief. We have to carry it with us. We have to ask people to come spot us and like, hey, I'm having a bad day. Will you come help? And so some days you'll slip back a little bit and can't carry it as well. But I don't believe that the grief, the weight of that actually gets lighter, because it is very heavy. It's very hard. I just think the ability to carry it gets easier because I've done it now for several years.
Mm-hmm. And I love how you've talked about, and you can share any extra ones you feel like you haven't mentioned yet, but I like that analogy because it can help people, especially if they're, like you said, your brain, when you're just in shock and overwhelmed with just all the things life's throwing at you. I love that just simple analogy of the gym and some resistance training, because then it can, even thinking of your physical health, and that way give you ideas of, okay, so if the grief I'm dealing with is this way, what are the ways I can support myself in getting better, quote unquote, at lifting this weight in the gym? And like you said, there's things that equate to like your nutrition or your support system. So I know you've sounded like you've been very diligent about like being willing to tap into your community and your friends, like coming to take care of you, saving you a seat. Is there any other things that you did to kind of take care of your health around this relationship with, building the strength to carry your grief well? And in a way that allows you to live a purposeful life still, that can still be powerful and impactful, and one that both you and your daughter are proud of.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I do think that's kind of just making sure we do have a vision. And I try to every year just kind of write out a vision statement, like what am I going to do? And I want to honor God. I want to honor the life of Sophia. And it's so important that we focus on those things, and not only the physical health, but obviously I've been to counseling, and I think that's important for our mental health, especially those early days when I'm just like, I don't even know which way is up. Having someone to help you out. And I remember one time when I went, and it was before Daniel's wedding, and it was so simple, but my therapist, she said, I said, I want to enjoy this day. I want to enjoy this wonderful celebration, but I know I'll never have that opportunity with Sophia. So I had that those conflicting emotions within me. And she said, just put your shoes where you can see them when you lay down at night, the shoes that you're going to dance in, because I had my dancing shoes. And so I put them there, and I was just thinking about what we're about to celebrate. And that was just so good to focus on the future and what I was going to have in Megan, a wonderful daughter-in-law, and not what I'd lost. And yes, I can grieve that, but this was a celebration of this wonderful marriage. And so, just having a purposeful focus on what I need to focus on. It was very simple, but it was very purposeful, and it was just one thing. It was like just those little bites, kind of like lifting weights, one at a time, just one little thing at a time. I'm going to focus on the positive and this wonderful marriage that's in front of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. That's so great. And so how can people who want to be supportive as friends, I know we've talked about this as well, and you just had a great response to it, of just how to be helpful to people who are in tragedy. People often don't know what to say nothing, what to do, how they can help. And I know you had some really great thoughts on that for people that want to be supportive.
It is very hard. And I know I've been on, before this happened to me, I thought, looking back, I'm like, boy, I didn't handle that well. But yeah, there are some things. I remember even going through the line for the visitation. The only thing people could say was just, there are no words, because there are no words. What do you say? There are no words that can take away the pain. One thing is, the old adage is kind of like, let me know what you need. Well, I can tell you, there were months, maybe the first year, I didn't even know what I needed. I knew I needed nutrition and the yard cleaned every now and then, but so I always suggest to people, just say, hey, I'm bringing supper. Can I bring it Tuesday or Thursday? And just say, hey, I'm going to clean your yard. Is 8 o'clock too early in the morning to, just go ahead and make the plan, and then make sure the time's okay with them. But that's just a way that you can do that, because somebody in grief is not going to pick up the phone normally and say, hey, I need dinner tonight. They need dinner, just schedule it. And so I would say be proactive in those steps on how you can do that. And we had, again, so many people just loved us well. Our local lumberyard, Short and Palk, donated all the wood. The Boy Scouts made me a ramp. A medical supply place dropped off all the things that I would need, wheelchair, everything. My pharmacist went to the pharmacy on July 4th at 11 o'clock at night to get me another medicine, because this was right after surgery, before visitation. And so they have just loved us so very well. Just doing what, was maybe even in their job, whether it was the pharmacist or the lumber company, or our trash people, Golden Environmental, they brought out 2 trash cans because we had so many people here, so much trash, just food trash, and from people, family and friends coming in. So just whatever you can do that's aligns with even your job and what you're good at, just give that abundantly to those that are in grief.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, because like you said, it's not, something you've experienced before, hopefully not, like it's so you don't really know, you don't know what you're going to need. You don't know what you'll forget that you need. Like you said, to forget to eat is common, it's like you don't remember what day it is. So it's just like, just the concept of, again, it's hard. You don't want to be a burden on people. And so to help people not have one more hurdle to overcome, like asking for help, just be, it just feels good to have one less barrier to entry of like, hey, bring in your lunch. What's, does this sound tasty to you? I'll bring it, and that just is such a simple thing, but it's hard for us to think of when you just, especially if you haven't been through something as tragic, you just don't really know the thoughts and the things happening. So I think that's just was really great point that I thought would be helpful for people to hear. And
I'll say this too. In grief, it is so physically draining as well. Not only did I have my physical injuries, but the grief was just draining. So, like, to your point, asking someone to do something, I felt like that took a lot out of me, and I didn't want to burden somebody. And I surely didn't want to burden somebody, 2 years later, 4th surgery, and, to bring me dinner yet again. But they continued to, and they kept feeding the dogs when I was out of town, or whatever the case may be. But, just being proactive and not waiting for someone to ask really does help out someone in grief or in pain.
Yes, that just makes so much sense. So one last thing to kind of talk about this, I want to take it kind of more toward what you've been doing now, moving through that now, the amazing things you are doing. But can you talk people through a little bit, again, just having experienced something like this, the faith journey for you, your relationship with God through it, what that looked like, kind of what you believe he thinks about what, this process together?
Yeah. And it's been a hard one. Sometimes when you go through something so devastating as this, and it wasn't just one loss or 2, it was 3 pretty big losses at a time. I'm fortunate that I grew up believing and knowing that God is sovereign. Doesn't mean I have to like all this happened, because I certainly don't. But I do believe that God is sovereign and I am not. And I don't understand it, and I don't like it. I feel like God could have saved Sophia. God could have restored my marriage. God could have healed my ankle, but he didn't. But yet I still know that he is sovereign. And so when we can't feel it, in our heart, we don't feel the warmth. I knew in my head, I'm like, he is sovereign. And I knew that. And I didn't see, sometimes when you're close with God, you're reading your Bible and you can feel that. But for me, I didn't feel it because it was so grief, and it was so heavy, and the weight of grief was upon me. But I saw the works of God through all these amazing people that helped us and that loved our family. And they were continually showing me the love of Christ. I remember asking my former pastor, he came over early in the process, and I remember just saying, Papa Bruce, I don't understand why all this has happened, because you reap what you sow, and this is not what I sowed. This should not be happening to me. And he directed my attention, and he said, Lynda, look at all the people who are loving you and caring for you. And that really gave me that shift in perspective, to focus on, again, the positive. And yes, there were terrible things that happened. Yes, I miss Sophia every day. But there are wonderful people around me who have loved me, and just looking at it through a different lens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really, really incredible. Um, so once you started getting back to movement, I know you said movement is healing. What are some of the things that you've discovered about yourself that you didn't know or would not have ever known without this being your journey? You know, what are you proud of or like, dang, wow, look at what I did. Look at where we're at now.
Well, I had so many losses, like one
Mm-hmm.
after the other after the other. I immediately needed to start putting some wins in the win column. So I was determined we have got to conquer some things. So that's why I immediately, wanted to start running. Which was kind of stupid, I'll be honest with you. It's not the easiest thing to walk in a prosthesis, much less let's just take off and do a 5K. So, but I did that. But I was so determined. I wanted to walk, I wanted to run, I wanted to hike, and I wanted to snow ski with my kids. One thing is, I know that my kids grief, they lost their sister, they lost their family unit, they lost the mother that they knew, and they were now taking care of the mother that had taken care of them. And while they did it in such grace and everything, I wanted to have the family dynamics that we'd had before, and wanted so much us to just enjoy some athletic adventures together. So hiking, and I've been hiking with my boys in Utah, and again, just snow skiing with them. I remember even one of them saying, afterwards, I'm like, I can't believe I did that. I was just so proud of myself. And again, because my left hip, I had to just really trust my left hip to hold. And he said, Mom, I didn't think you were going to do that well either. So while they were always cheering me on, and it was so sweet because I had going down, speaking of that, the trauma I had when I first went down, as I started getting closer and the runs got tighter and tighter, and the noise of the people going by were going fast. And I got so anxious, and I'm not an anxious person pre-accident. I got so anxious, and I remember I ended up in my oldest son's chest, just crying and so upset, because my mind was saying, danger, danger, danger. I'm going to get hit from behind. I'm going to take a bad fall, and I'm going to be injured again. I'm never going to be able to do this. And so it was just terrible. And I had the guys come and get me on a sled, and they said, "No, we can take you all the way to the lodge." I said, "No, no, no, no. If I don't ski out, I will never get back up on these skis." So they took me to a wide open space, and I skied down to the lodge. And then the next day when we were skiing, it was so sweet because I felt like the president of the United States, because I was covered, Secret Service all around me. I was following Naomi. James was behind me. I was flanked on both sides. Nobody was getting in the perimeter. I was well taken care of. And it was just so sweet how my children have just really circled around me and loved me and taken care of me. And they've been proud of me too, I believe, in this journey as well.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it's so inspiring just and I'm not even related to you just to see and hear the things and again you in person and of course even on here on video like you just give off good energy of positive you don't walk around like someone with a chip on their shoulder. I can tell that like the inspiration you draw upon to live a beautiful and abundant life isn't like from a negative stance of like, oh, well, I'm going to show everyone, or I'm going to like, show my ex-husband this, or I'm going to like, you just don't come at it from that negative space, but from just good and wanting to do good and be inspiring to other people and to advocate for others. And that's one thing I'd love for you moved into being an amputee advocate, working with so everybody can move. Tell everybody about that and the work that you've been doing there, because that's incredible stuff that I know I love being a part of, and I know people would love to hear about.
Yes. So Everybody Can Move is a nationwide movement where we're working to get secondary devices available for amputees and people with limb difference and limb loss. And so many of us want to run again or bike or play a sport, or sometimes it's just having a shower leg or something to assist, not just your everyday leg that has to last for years. And I don't think people realize it's not covered by insurance. And so we are working to get that covered. And then in the state of Georgia last year, the law was passed that under certain circumstances, the companies do have to cover that secondary device for amputees. So that was such a big win. And then this year, we had another part of that to have more people have it covered for them. So I'm actually covered this year with being on the state plan. And so that was just really a win for the state of Georgia. I do have a running blade, and I got that through Challenge Athletes Foundation. And so I had to get a grant to get that, but those grants aren't available to everybody. There's obviously limited funds, limited donations, so everyone can't take advantage of that. And they're not just, giving out these secondary devices. You're not going to get a running blade if you weren't running prior to, but in order to get us to live the life we were living before, we need those secondary devices. If I tore my ACL, they'd give me surgery to let me repair that so I could, say, play soccer again. But so we need the devices, we need the equipment to make sure that we can live that full and abundant life going forward like we were before.
Right. I mean, because just because someone, has a limb difference or lost a limb, like they're still human. So even, I mean,
Absolutely.
I know it blows people's minds that even for like children, it's just one device so you can prove that they've outgrown it and that we as practitioners have adjusted it as much as humanly possible for it to be doable before skin irritation and breakdown. It's like, kids are supposed to be able to be kids. Like the same kind of leg that lets them walk around school and do things isn't the same thing that would allow them to do the activities they want to do in PE, or to run and keep up with everyone on the playground, or to want to try out for the track team. Like, or it's like, I know so many people have been blown away to know that like even kids, that's just discounted or it's just not thought of. And it's like, but if your kid was that, would you not want them to be able to go do that? Or same, if it's no different even for adults, like, okay, you already went through all this trauma. If something like that was just your therapy was to go for a jog or to take those walks or to go on hikes, to be with your family's all athletic. Those are the activities they want to go do. Like, you should be able to do that. Or even again, just the simple necessity of standing in the shower and not having to sit and maneuver your way in and out. And like all of that is actually not a simple thing. We just forget about it because it seems simple until it's not, until you don't have it,
right.
And so it's just so interesting. So I love raising awareness about that, because when people hear about it, they're not happy, just as other people. They're like, how do we change this? Who do we go to?
Yeah.
Who's the state person? And I know you said, was it on and I'll have it in the show notes, the So Everybody Can Move kind of like more national website to tell you what's, tell them.
Yeah, so we do have, it's a national movement. So we have it on the So Everybody Can Move website, and you can go in there and check your state, and then you have a map of the state, which ones, where they are, if legislation has been introduced, if we've had laws that have been passed. So our goal is to get past 28 states by the year 2028, when the Paralympics are going to be in Los Angeles. And then we'd like to make it a federal law so that will be covered for everyone. And so that's really what we're working toward. And so we have people in all the different states working toward that, patient advocates, practitioners that are working hard for that. So it's been a fun journey to go to the Capitol and to talk with the different senators and the representatives. I do love some politics. And so it's been fun for me to go up there and talk and to share my story. And again, I just want, out of all my story, it's such a hard, I have shed so many tears, so many tears. And I still shed a lot of tears, but I just don't want them to go to waste. I want some good to come out of the bad situation. And that's really why I advocate for this, why I love to speak to different groups, and why I love to write, because I just want there to be some positive, and I want other people. I was so blessed to have people walk with me through this journey. And if I can somehow just encourage them to keep moving forward and to keep walking forward, I just want to be that for them.
Yeah, well, and those tears are definitely not going to, they're watering new seeds in people that, again, like that energy and additional love and compassion and understanding is, taking changers of this world to continue stepping into the life they were called to live, no matter what happened to them. And you're a catalyst to make sure that, the enemy doesn't convince them otherwise with the lies that will be most certainly circulating in their minds in those times. So you're that voice of truth that's like, let me water you. I'm here. Okay. We can cry together, but we're going to let it be watering what's growing in us. So I'm just so proud of you and admiration of you for that. So An interesting question I wanted to just kind of ask is, if you were going to sit across from the version of yourself in the hospital just after the accident, what would you tell her that she wouldn't believe just yet?
Mm. Oh, that's a tough one. Yeah, and they said from the very beginning, they said, you will never run again. That was one thing. And again, it's not that I love to run. I just love to eat. Therefore, I run. So, but I love the way my body feels when I'm running. And so, I would tell myself in the hospital, you will survive this, and not physically, because I never thought that my life was in jeopardy, but emotionally I thought my life was almost over, and so that you will rise up from the ashes and there will be beauty. And so that's probably what I'd tell myself.
No, that's wonderful. I love that. Well, where can everybody find you, follow you, stay up to date? Y'all, she's working on a book, so we're going to make sure we have her on again once that is completed. But yeah, what do you guys, where do you want people to, where do you want them to follow?
Yeah, so I have a website, Lynda, and that's Lynda with a Y, LYNDAS, Fisher.com. And I know they'll all be in the show notes. So I do have a website. And so if you want to join me in a newsletter, I try to put those out, once a month, twice a month. And then on socials, Lynda S. Fisher on Facebook and Instagram, and follow me. And, sometimes it's just a funny story of the guy at the airport who had an extra prosthesis coming through, and my bag got pulled, and he said, "You got a trophy?" I'm like, "No." And I pointed to my leg. He goes, "Oh," and he was real cute. He didn't even open the bag. He just handed it to me. But sometimes it's just funny stories like that, the life of an amputee. And then sometimes I like to share encouraging words and just what life looks like on this side. Again, just to encourage people. I know people, when you walk through things like this, you do come into contact with people who've lost children, and there's more people than I ever realized, and it's a terrible club to be in. And then you realize, but all of us have loss, all of us have loss in some way, whether it's health, relationships, death of loved ones. We all have loss. So I just want to be that encouraging voice to them. So Facebook, Instagram, my website, love for you to join us there, sign up for the newsletter, and we can stay in touch.
That's awesome. Great. Well, now time for our very last question. What does living an abundant life mean to you? And if someone were to ask you how they could start to build an abundant life for themselves, what would you tell them?
For me, I still have those points in time, as anyone could imagine, that I get down and I get upset and I'm in sorrow and in grief, and maybe even physical pain or some irritation from my prosthetic. But when I hit those lows again, I try to get beyond myself. And when I think of when I'm missing Sophia a little extra, I will try to text another mom that I know that's lost a child. Because sometimes when we get past our grief, we realize, we're not the only one, and we need to share some encouragement with someone else, because it means so much to me when I get a text that says, "Thinking about you, praying for you." Again, just pushing that forward. And so when we think about someone else, we kind of take that off of ourselves. And so just looking forward and not looking inward to myself during those hard days, that gives me the ability to have that abundant life.